Welcome to the Football Guys DFS show for week 3 of the NFL season. We will all have all of your cash, GPP, and sleeper plays and more. So before we get started, I want to welcome, of course, our good friend Devin Knotts, head of DFS here at Football Guys. And then we have a guest tonight. We have Jamie Calandro he is a senior analyst, president of ops for Fantasy Team Advice, DFS analyst for FF Diehards, feature writer for Fantasy Pros, 3 times FSWA finalist, and Jamie was number 2 in the Fantasy Pros ECR rankings for last week. So Jamie knows his stuff, and we're thrilled that he can be here tonight. I'm going to start with Jamie, welcome you in. Maybe let people know where they can find you. We kind of ran through that, but what are you working on right now?
Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. You're one of my favorite guys on here, have been for a while. And Devin, it's great to finally get on with you too. Basically, it's the football season's kicked off. My work can mostly be found on Football Diehards. Every Thursday is the cash article. Every Friday is the GPP stack article. So that'll be up tomorrow. And Tuesdays I have on Fantasy Pros the pricing exploitation guide for like an early jump on the week. And Eric Romoff at Fantasy Nav and I do the Friday night DFS rundown for Football Diehards. That's Friday at 9 Eastern. So it's a great time to be a football fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much again. And Devin, how are you tonight? You ready to go?
I'm always ready. Let's do it.
All right. So first we're going to start with the games of the week. And I want to start with Devin and kind of throw it through. What games are you looking at this week when you're building out your lineups? And then Jamie will toss to you afterwards.
Looks like we lost Jamie. So I think that if that's to me, then I'm looking primarily at the Chargers-Vikings game to start the week. I think that's where most people are gonna be looking. I think that both defenses are not very strong. Over under is 54 in that game. Austin Eckler looks like he's not gonna go, which a lot of people are not gonna go back to Josh Kelly. I certainly am. I was not on Kelly last week. I didn't love him simply because of the matchup, but I think the matchup is a lot stronger this week going up against that Minnesota defense that's missing. They sort of rebuilt their defense, and it's not the same as it has been in the past. So we're looking at that game. And then another game that I'm looking at, there's a lot of just garbage games this week, but I think the Chiefs need to be looked at against the Bears. 48's the total, and they're 12.5-point favorites. This Bears defense, they fired the defensive coordinator. They just seem to be in a bit of disarray already, and it's only week 3. So I could see the Chiefs coming out and just putting up a huge total this week.
Yeah, it certainly feels like a get-right spot for the Chiefs. We have you, Jamie?
Yeah, my computer doesn't seem to want to do this tonight, so we're on the phone right now. So let me know if there's any issues.
Yeah, sure. We're just running through games right now. We started out, Devin highlighted the Vikings-Chargers game and then the Chiefs side of the Bears game. Are there any other games that you are keeping an eye on right now for this week?
Well, I mean, first, I agree that the big one is Vikings-Chargers. That's fantasy points galore, the highest totaled one of the week. I'm looking at a couple more. I think a fun one to look at here that might go overlooked is Denver, Miami. The pace that Miami plays at is always good for fantasy. Denver hasn't really shown the Sean Payton-ishness that we've wanted to see from their offense too. But that kind of game kind of has sneaky shootout potential attached to it too. And I'm really to Houston and Jacksonville this week, especially with Derek Stingley being ruled out. That helps Jacksonville a lot. And Trevor Lawrence is playing like a QB1. But even on the other side, I mean, we're seeing the emergence of Nico Collins and Tank Dell has been such a good rookie, being peppered with targets, and they've let CJ Stroud throw the ball 91 times through 2 weeks. So I think, if the game script, if they're playing from behind, he's going to do that again. So I like that one for stack potential as well.
Yeah, and other ones that I'm looking at are the Cowboys side of the Cowboys and Cardinals game. I don't know that the Cardinals are going to put up much resistance, but we've seen them hang in games, and so that will help the Cowboys side. the Ravens side of the Colts game, and depending on who's going to be that Colts quarterback. But I think the Ravens, that seems like a get-right opportunity for that new offense. And then maybe a little bit of the Falcons-Lions as well. But while we go into that, we're going to go through cash games first. And Devin, if you want to start us off, go through cash games, maybe look at what quarterbacks you're looking at for cash games.
Yeah, it's Kirk Cousins for me this week. At 6,900, I think he's going to be the guy that most people target, especially on DraftKings, where it's that 300-yard bonus. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I think that this is the game that you want to target. The Chargers gave up 472 miles to Tua Tagovailoa in week 1, and who's going to stop Justin Jefferson, right? So they haven't been able to run the ball. Alexander Mattison looks like he's now in a timeshare, at least with Cam Akers. Maybe Cam Akers takes the lead role, but they're not. That's not going to be a this week thing. They're going to come out and throw the ball heavily, and I fully expect this game to be a back and forth type game with Kirk Cousins being at the helm. If you want to go cheap, it's a little risky. I don't think you need to go cheap this week, but I sort of have some love for Andy Dalton at 4,900. And the reason for that is simply because Bryce Young has looked terrible. Like I think he's averaging like 153 yards passing per game. And Seattle's secondary is amongst the worst in the NFL. We talked about this last week where they had a bunch of guys who just sort of popped in and out last year as far as overperforming their draft stock. So they had a bunch of 4th round, 5th round guys, and they're starting to show that they're not as good as what they were last year. Tariq Woolen might be out for Seattle, and if he is, that's a huge, huge detriment to that defense. So Dalton could be like a sneaky 230, 240 yard guy with 2 or 3 touchdowns, and all of a sudden, maybe not in cash, but in like one of those, if you're playing in like a 5-person or a 10-person league and you want to stack elsewhere, he could be a guy that you're looking at.
Jamie, do you have any other ones?
Well, it's Cousins for me too. No question. I'm going with Cousins in cash game at quarterback unless something ridiculous happens. The cheap one I'll kind of throw in that I like is if you don't want to spend that much is the other side of the game that you were talking about, and that's Geno. He bounced back big time. Geno Smith has his full complement of receivers. Carolina only a 19% pressure rate so far this year, which is bottom 10. And they don't have Shaq Thompson anymore, and they don't have J.C. Horn anymore either. So, he could carve them up on the other side. 5,700 is a nice price for him.
Yeah, I think Cousins is going to be the chalk, and that's where my mind was as well. I also like Geno. My cheap one, Jamie, you mentioned it earlier. CJ Stroud, I think, kind of stood out to me as potentially a cheap option with how much we've seen him throw through the first 2 games. He's on pace to break Tom Brady's single season passing attempts record as a rookie, so that's pretty wild. But we're going to move on to running backs. And Jamie, do you want to start off with your cash running backs for this week?
Yeah, this is a tough one because, we're talking about Cousins, and I'm pretty much bent on stacking with Justin Jefferson, who, not to tease the wide receivers early here, but I really think Tony Pollard is such a good expensive cash play this week at $8,000. As long as Eckler misses, he's the most, which looks like he's the most expensive running back on the slate. But I think he's well worth it. He's they're what, I think 12.5 point favorites last I saw against the Cardinals. So the game script sets him up so well. He's got 8 red zone targets or red zone carries already through 2 games. He had 32 touches last week against the Jets. We could see the ceiling capped, I think, a little bit if they're killing the Cardinals. And for cash, you don't need a ceiling. It's just the floor, and his floor is rock solid. And then on the cheap end, I like Joshua Kelly a lot this week again, as long as Eckler does miss. We talked about that game. Minnesota's getting gashed all over the place. He's really not in danger of losing carries to anybody. He's not involved in the passing game, but his against the Titans. So I'll probably go right back to him in cash this week as well.
Yeah, Devin, I know last week you were on the expensive running backs. Are you kind of still staying in that area, or are you shifting for this week?
No, I think this week I am shifting just because I do want Justin Jefferson, and it's difficult if you have to pay for Cousins and then pay for Pollard and then pay for Jefferson. What you're left with is a bunch of guys. So I don't know that I like Tony Pollard a lot. I just want to prioritize Jefferson a little bit more, especially on DraftKings where that 100-yard bonus does come into effect. FanDuel, I do agree that Pollard is probably the play. I like spending up more on that site at the running back position. There's a couple guys that I'm looking at this week. So Jerome Ford, I think, is going to be chalk. Whether or not he should be, I think, is a complete debate. But at 4,800, the bar that he needs to hit is so low that whether or not the matchup is difficult or not, I think he gets there. Even if he gets 40 yards, catches 3 passes, maybe scores a touchdown, who knows? But I think that, 8 to 10 points is really all you're hoping for at that price as a floor. And I think he can certainly get there.
I wrote an article that I published today. This is the 3rd straight week we're getting a cheap running back thrust into a major role, but going against the Tennessee run defense. It was Jamal Williams, it was Joshua Kelly, and now it's so I mean I'm all in on cash, but I've done well fading them in GPPs, and then probably will do so again, same way.
Yep. And then some other guys that I'm looking at this week, Kenneth Walker at 6,200. So the Panthers have allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs this season. They're allowing two rushing touchdowns per game to the position. And if we're talking about this game, maybe having a little bit of back and forth, we both sort of like both sides of the quarterback position. I do think that this game could surprise some people. And Walker is going to be that guy. I think that he's going to be the guy that's going to get a majority of the carries. He's probably going to get the red zone work. So if they're going to give up another touchdown, which they've given up 4 so far this year, 2 to Tony Jones and 2 to Tyler Algier, I think Walker could get in. And then one situation that I'm really looking at is Isaiah Pacheco. If he misses, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, becomes really popular. And I personally would skyrocket him to the top of my board, just because I want some action on this Chiefs side of the ball. So if Pacheco is if he's active, then you can't really do anything there. But keep an eye on that, because at 4,100, I think Edwards-Helaire becomes really intriguing. And then if Eckler misses, Joshua Kelly is like a must play.
Yeah, those are all great call outs. One other one, watching the injury situation with Derrick Henry, because if he misses, that could open up Tajay Spears for a major role. And that's another cheap option to step into. Another one on an injury situation, Justice Hill looks like he will be out this week. And I think Gus Edwards kind of less on DraftKings because he's not going to be catching passes, but against the Colts, I think that they're going to be grinding the ball quite a bit with Edwards, and I think that could be a good spot for him. But at the same time, he's pretty closely priced to Joshua Kelly, and so that probably is the better play to go with Kelly there. Moving on to wide receivers, Devin, I will start with you. I'm guessing that we're all kind of on Justin Jefferson, but do you have other options that you're looking for as well?
Yeah, I think there's a number of guys. There's a lot of cheap guys this week, which is interesting. So like two cheap guys right off the bat for me, Tank Dell and Adam Thielen, I think are both in good spots. I talked about the love for Andy Dalton this week. I think that Thielen is the guy there. I'm not convinced that Jonathan Mingo is ready to take over a prime position in that offense. And then Dell looked good last week. I mean, 10 targets, 72 yards, a touchdown. Could there be a little bit of a back and forth in this Houston-Jacksonville game? I think so. Are they going to throw, however many times they threw last week again? Probably not. But if I had to pay up, I mean, 3,600 is a really strong price for 10 targets. Anytime you can see that, I think it's always going to be at least intriguing. And then, realistically, I do like Justin Jefferson quite a bit. Looking through the rest of the lineups that I have so far, taking either Keenan Allen or Mike Williams is probably smart. You could realistically just stack this Minnesota Chargers game and you're probably competitive in cash. Keenan is probably a little bit safer in cash, while Williams is probably a little bit better of a GPP play, but I do like both of those guys this week as well.
Jamie, do you have anything else that you want to add?
I don't disagree with anything that you just said there. I mean, those are a lot of the same plays I'm targeting as well. The only thing I'll differ in is that I'm not at all afraid of Mike Williams in cash either. At 6,000, I think he, to me, is probably the perfect way to get that bring back of the Cousins Jefferson stack if you want there. Keenan Allen is the one I would prefer, obviously, in a vacuum, but at 1,600, tougher to gauge. So, I mean, I'll build some lineups out and see what we get, but I love Mike Williams in cash. You mentioned Tank Dell. I'm big on him. I'll talk about the other one in that game. You know, Nico Collins nuked for me last week in cash. We were guessing in the Fantasy Pros Discord chat of what his price would be. It was after that what it would raise to, and we were kind of guessing around low to mid 6,000s. And when he settled at 5,300, we were quite pleased. I mean, but the guy is he's got 20 targets. He's third in the NFL in air yards. So I really like him as a cash play too. And even in I'll go overweight in GPPs if it seems like the masses are flocking to Tank Dell at 3,600. Jaden Reed, I think still at 3,800, there's no reason to not consider him with him under 4,000. And I'm hoping, I don't know, bounce myself back and forth on this, but I'm hoping for Jahan Dotson. There are positive signs and he's under 5,000. They should be throwing a lot against the Bills in that one.
Yeah, one other one. I'm kind of watching the injury situation, both with Anthony Richardson, I guess, and with Marlon Humphrey, because I think Michael Pittman could be a bring back on that Baltimore game if Baltimore gets out to a lead. But then on the Baltimore side, Zay Flowers, I'm going to talk about him every single show. Devin's going to make fun of me on my Zay love, but we're going to go back to Zay Flowers a little bit too. We've seen that massive involvement in that offense. And so those are other ones. And then CeeDee Lamb, I mean, we're all in Jefferson. And so it's really hard to get CeeDee Lamb into your lineup. But that's a move off of Pollard because Lamb saw such heavy target volume last week against the Jets. And I think that the way the Cowboys offense is setting up is to involve him very, very heavily in that primary receiver role. And so that's another one that it's difficult to move that all around trying to grab that Vikings Chargers game, but I do like him quite a bit. That's probably more GPP though. I'm going to move on to tight ends. And Jamie, do you want to start us off where you're looking at tight end? Are you looking to spend up or are you kind of looking for some of these value plays?
For me at tight end in cash, it's either spend all the way up or all the way down. And my plan is to spend up at the other positions this week, though it'll be down. So, I mean, I'll mention Travis Kelce and say that he is always worth it, especially at a $7,200 price tag, which we would consider a bargain if he was a wide. Wanting to spend up at tight end, spend up for him. I'm probably going to land on Zach Ertz as of right now. He's he's averaging 4.3 yards per target, which is horrid. I think it's only a matter of time before it's Trey McBride season there, but it's not yet. He's got 18 targets and 12 receptions, which is easily leading the Cardinals in both. And he's 3,500, which at the tight end position in cash. So that's likely the route that I'm going to be going. And Dallas did just give up, a solid game to Tyler Conklin. So it's not like they're immovable over the middle there.
Where are you going, Devin?
A couple places. I think that Zach Ertz is certainly interesting at 3,500. He's sneakily being the top safe guy in Arizona, if there is one. Just peppering with targets, which is always something that you're going to look for. And then, I don't know, I do sort of like Travis Kelce this week. I think it's a get-right game for the Chiefs. If you can afford it, certainly it's a tough decision between Pollard and Kelce. But, I mean, look, there's a couple, if you take Adam Thielen and Tank Dell, you're in an okay spot there to probably spend up to Kelce. And if Kelce's going to score 2 touchdowns, you're probably going to want him in cash. And they should be able to do just about whatever they want against the Bears this weekend. So I do like Kelce quite a bit, or Zach Ertz in cash this week.
Yeah, one other one that I'm going to eye is Dalton Kincaid as well. He's kind of in that same price range as Zach Ertz, but you're playing with Josh Allen instead of playing with Joshua Dobbs, and so I'm going to pick Josh Allen over Josh Dobbs where I'm going to go. But we're going to move on to GPPs. I'm going to Devin. Do you see anything else on quarterback on GPPs that you were targeting?
Yeah, I think it's a complete flip. So, you could take a number of different guys, and I'll just go through it really quickly, but you could look at Patrick Mahomes. He could theoretically have a massive game. Justin Herbert at $600 more than Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins is going to take over a lot of that roster percentage. And, it could be a situation where both of these quarterbacks have big games, but Herbert has 4 touchdowns and Cousins has 2. And you're going to want to have the Herbert side of that. Going down, I think that Deshaun Watson is really interesting. This is sort of like a make or break game for Cleveland. They're facing Tennessee, who's allowed 300 yards passing or more to Derek Carr and then Justin Herbert last week. So if Watson's going to become that guy, he's had a bad weather game and he's had just a weird game where they lost their number 1 running back. If this offense is going to perform, it sort of needs to be now, and they're in a prime matchup to actually exploit that. And a lot of people are just going to write off Watson at 6,100 and look elsewhere. I do think that that's a potential situation where the Browns come out and just, throw the ball all over the place. And it's a bit of a fade against Jerome Ford as well, just because if people are taking him and the touchdowns come through Watson, then you're significantly advantaged against the field.
Yeah, I like that play as well. I was looking at Watson, and I think that it does have to be a little bit of a get-right game for them based upon some of the performances that we've seen from some of the other guys against the Titans. Jamie, do you have anything else you want to hit on the GPP side for quarterbacks?
I really like that Watson call too, by the way. The Cleveland passing game is a perfect way. My favorite
maybe
one,
it's going to get too popular now, so I don't like it as much.
Yeah. I think actually my favorite one is Trevor Lawrence. He's not going overlooked per se as far as ownership goes, but as of right now, he still is coming in at about half of Kirk Cousins, which makes it a fine just straight line pivot in price play. Off of him there, I mentioned that Derek Stingley is out, which is really, really good for the Jacksonville offense. They're already missing 2 other members of their secondary, and he's playing like someone who, needs to be talked about as a top 5 or a top 3 quarterback even in the league. So, I mean, if as long as he's not climbing up goes, which I don't think he will, because I think everyone will be on Cousins in that price range. He's probably the one that I'm gonna hammer the most at that in GPPs.
Yeah, the other one that I was kind of looking at was Lamar Jackson, because losing Justice Hill now after losing J.K. Dobbins 2 weeks in a row, I think we might see his rushing get back involved a little bit, and the passing looks developed to the point where he could be targeting that 300 yard or bonus as well. So moving to 2 running backs.
What about
go ahead,
Justin
man.
Fields?
I want to believe
he's
so
going to
bad.
come out and play backyard football.
Yeah.
And this is sort of another make or break situation for Fields. They're going to be really far behind. So
yes,
garbage time galore potential in this game where could he come out and rush for 100 yards? It wouldn't surprise me, because they're just going to be dropping back. And it sounds like, according to Justin Fields, he's just going to go out and have fun. And it could be a disaster, but Fields is at least intriguing enough to me this week to maybe throw a dart there, because no one is looking that way.
Yeah, no, I've thought the exact same thing on that one. I think that exactly. I would be surprised if they don't use his rushing the way that he kind of gave that press conference and kind of said, hey, let's do what I'm comfortable with, more or less. And so you'd think that they would flash back to what we saw through that stretch of the middle of the year last year. And so he's got a great ceiling. All right, we're going to move on to running backs now. And Jamie, I want you to start us off on GPPs. Who are you targeting running back GPP wise?
So I'm actually I'm curious to know Devin's take on this, since he talked up Dalton and the Carolina passing game a little bit more. But I mean, it was all week Miles Sanders was my favorite kind of mid-tier GPP play there. And, just for the simple reason that he's averaging just under 20 touches a game. he has the second most targets of running backs, believe it or not. Seattle gave up the third most fantasy points per game to running backs last year. It's the sixth most already so far this year. So, I mean, I don't know. I kind of got to reestablish that. I'm curious if Devin, if you think that Dalton playing hurts Sanders, just due to the fact that maybe he's a little more efficient with the passing game.
I think that their touchdown probability probably increases with Dalton just because, I mean, Bryce Young just hasn't looked like he's ready to be an NFL quarterback. And I think it gives you just a little bit more consistency. I think if anything, it should help the entire offense.
Yeah, and I think I'm stacking Seattle too, so I always like to find the bring back there. And he's the one that I like the most there. And you're gonna throw me off the show for this one, but I'm really not opposed to Alexander Mattison in GPPs this week. I don't think that Akers is an immediate blow to him. I think he is for sure in the short term, maybe even as much as next week. But I think this is Madison's last shot. I think he's a direct pivot at no ownership off of the passing game that everybody's going to be on for the Vikings. And the Chargers have been known to get gashed by running backs, almost 6 yards per carry in the preseason. Bottom 5 the last 2 years in fantasy points per game. In large field GPPs, I don't mind taking a shot on this because everybody hates him now.
Another guy everyone hates is Dameon Pierce, in sort of the same familiar area. 5,200 is just a good price. I don't like Dameon Pierce against Jacksonville. The matchup isn't ideal. They've been good against the run this year, but Pierce is another guy who's going to be like 1 or 2% rostered, and at 5,200 allows you for a lot of flexibility this week. So he's certainly a guy that, look, a lot of people are going to be looking at the same guys this week. They're going to be looking at Jerome Ford. They're going to be looking at Tony Pollard. They're going to be looking at, Kenneth Walker's going to be popular this week as well. I think you can really try and differentiate yourself by looking at some of these guys who are going to be lower rostered. Whether it is Madison, whether it is James Conner, whether it's Pierce, whether it's taking a look at Derrick Henry, even though the matchup's difficult against Cleveland. So there's a number of different ways you could go about this week. And I do think that a lot of that roster percentage, especially if Isaiah Pacheco is out, is going to concentrate around a few different guys that are good cash game plays. But as we think about running backs, they're extremely volatile. So you may want to differentiate yourself in GPPs.
Yeah, one name I haven't heard mentioned yet. I wonder your guys' thoughts on Raheem Mostert, because he looks to have the lion's share of that workload for the Dolphins, and we know that we already mentioned at the top of the show how much upside lies in that Dolphins offense and in their implied total this week. Is that a guy that you guys are on at all?
Go ahead.
I think he's going to be popular. I right now in my roster percentages have him as the second highest running back at 6,000. I think he's going to be, somewhere in the neighborhood of, let me see where I have him, about 20% rostered.
Okay.
Denver's defense is it's not very good, but their run defense hasn't been bad. So they've allowed 73 yards on 20 carries per game. Brian Robinson and Josh Jacobs. So it's decent competition, not a bunch of nobodies, but he's fine. He's like nothing that I'm clamoring about. I think the roster percentage is too high at 20%, but if you wanted to play him in cash, I think he's completely okay. I would just like to see him at like 12 to 14% before I would really be thinking about playing him.
And they do get Armstead back this week, it looks like, which is a big help to him as well. And I think Ahmed is out, right? Or is it officially he's out yet?
I believe he's going to scratch. I don't know that it's official yet, but yeah, they've been really hesitant to use Devin Achane. Maybe it's his chance, but they've had no qualms at all about giving Mostert at the lion's share of the work there. We're going to move on to wide receivers now. Devin, I want you to start us off with your GPP wide receivers that you're targeting.
I mean, the first name that comes off the board is Tyreek Hill, and he is the perfect GPP play this week. He's going to be popular. but not nearly as popular as Justin Jefferson. So you're saving like 12 to 13% if Jefferson's going to be in the 25 to 30% range. I have Tyreek Hill somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 to 15% likely. And look, they're very similar players with very, very similar upside as far as fantasy production. With Jalen Waddle being banged up, I think that Hill is going to be a great pivot off of Jefferson. And then realistically, I think you could even, look at Tua Tagovailoa if you wanted to stack that game. So there's a lot of different ways that you could go about that. So if you're paying up, it's Tyreek. It's a pretty easy way to go about it. I do like Adam Thielen at the bottom. Again, I think that Andy Dalton has a big week. But one name that I'm really looking at in the middle is Michael Thomas. And I don't know that I've sort of been on him all year. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but he's been okay. He has 17 targets. We talked about, Nico Collins, who had 20. I think that they're at the same price. So they're right in that area. I think Nico Collins is going to be he's more explosive, obviously, but Thomas will score a touchdown at some point this year. And going up against the Packers, it's an okay matchup. It's not horrendous. With seemingly no running backs in that building, Tony Jones and Kendre Miller, I think that they could just pepper Michael Thomas on some underneath things, and he could end up with 8 or 9 catches let me look at what his percentage is at this point on Thursday. He is at, why isn't this coming up? I have him at 4% rostered. That's it's a good price. Olave is going to be somewhere in the 12 to 15% range. So I do like Thomas there a little bit. And then I'll go one more. I think you're going to struggle with it every week, but choosing between Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk is going to be a dilemma. And Kirk's price didn't rise as much as I thought it would. So 5,400 for Christian Kirk. He's going to be in the 10% range. I think that he's interesting as well.
Jamie, do you have anything else for us?
Yeah, I don't think we've given Detroit enough love for this week. The one thing about them is when you look at last year, the team at home averaged over 30 points per game. Jared Goff's QB rating was almost 30 points higher at home than it was on the road. He averaged 2.2 touchdown passes per game against under 1 on the road last year. And he's at home, so if he's at home, I'm passing to, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is fine just because he's who he is. But I really like Josh Reynolds. Just based on what he's done the last couple of weeks, it doesn't seem like he's getting much love. He's only 4,200, which is not much more expensive he was than last week. He leads that team in air yards. He only has 3 less targets than Amon-Ra St. Brown so far this year. And he actually had, he has history, you remember, they were both on the Rams together. So they have a chemistry that predates Detroit. So I'm kind of really bullish on both of them. And I don't think, Amon-Ra kind of goes into that category as you mentioned. Tyreek Hill is, just such the perfect GPP play off Jefferson. I think you'll get even less with St. Brown there because even though he's less money, people are going to be looking at Jefferson and Hill as the pivot there. So I'm really into the Lions receivers. I guess Marquise Brown. I don't like saying 2 Cardinals in the same show, but the targets were there last week, and he's only 4,900. I don't hate it as a bring back if you want to stack Dallas in that game, but we're talking like mixed multi-entry in the large field for that. And Dotson, who I mentioned before as a cash play, I think is a little bit more appropriate as a GPP play now, looking to see that he's well into the single digits. But 4,900, you're hoping that bounce back comes around behind Buffalo, and he does lead the team in targets.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't mention the name Baker Mayfield, Devin's not going to hit that mute button on you. But Baker's not on this slot, and Phil is not here tonight, so we're safe on that this week.
I almost did it with Marquise Brown. The 9 yards per completion just scares the. He's not being targeted deep, but maybe they change it, so we'll see.
Yeah, playing off of two of the quarterbacks that Devin mentioned, Amari Cooper, we saw him come back. It was kind of questionable if he was going to play Monday night. Came in, had 90-yard game, and that Titans passing defense that we saw Keenan Allen carve up last week for 2 touchdowns. And then the other one playing off Justin Fields, DJ Moore. If you're going to go out there and if you're just going to play instinctual and let it go a little bit, we saw all summer long how much of a rapport that DJ Moore and Justin Fields had. And so that could be one that chasing the entire game there and getting potential heavy target usage, depending on how much that offense changes just off 1 week. And I don't imagine that ownership is going to be very, very high this week.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. Jamie, what do you got for GPPs on tight ends? Are you kind of the same place as Cash? Are you moving in a different direction?
Well, I mean, Hawkinson to me sounds like the obvious one here. He's only 700 less than Kelsey. So if you're kind of in that upper range, I think the mentality based on early ownerships here is that if I'm spending this much, I'm just going to go all the way up to Kelsey. But by doing so, you're ignoring the highest totaled game of the week. And Hawkinson has been absolutely fine, even with Jefferson doing what he always does. So I do like him as the expensive play there. And oh man, strike me dead for saying this because I talk about anti-rookie tight ends until I'm blue in the face, but going back to the Detroit thing, I cannot ignore the fact that he's got 5 catches in each of his first 2 NFL games. And Sam Laporta is only 4,000. I mean, theoretically, with a role like that, he should be pushing a little bit more than 4,000 at that rate. And I have not seen ownerships on him yet, but I'm curious what they are. Durham Smythe, Smith. Is it Smith or Smythe? I'm actually not sure. I should know this.
I think it's Smythe, and he's about 6%.
Is it Smythe? Oh, really? Yeah, I guess.
His dad is mad at me on Twitter. His dad messaged me and was not too pleased about a tweet that I had.
You chose violence with Durham Smythe's dad?
Apparently, he chose violence on me, apparently.
Wow. Well, you've made it then, Jeff.
I don't know about all that.
Maybe his dad maybe his dad will hear this, but I like him at 2,900. 6% is okay. I guess it's not ideal, but 2,900 for a tight end who is running as many routes as he is fine by me in any contest.
What do you have for me, Devin?
Cole Kmet 1%.
Yeah.
Breakdown. We saw it when Fields was running just last year where Kmet had a couple of long touchdowns. I think that you could stack this game in a number of different ways. I do think that I've convinced myself throughout this show that the Bears are going to put up points. And Fields is just going to go out and have a day. So I think Fields and Kmet are a decent stack if you wanted to go that route. And at 1% rostered, he has 9 catches through the first 2 games. Yeah, 9 catches, 13 targets. So at 1% at 4,300, not a lot of people are going to be looking that way.
Yeah, one for me, a total punt, depending on if Logan Thomas is available or not. Cole Turner at 2,700 on DraftKings. That would be a total punt on the position, but he could have that opportunity open up, and they could be chasing that Buffalo offense. We saw production out of the Washington offense last week, and so that's one that if Logan Thomas is out of the lineup and you want to punt the position, that's another one to keep an eye on. We're going to move on. We're going to hit our favorite stacks of the week. And Devin, you want to lead us off with your favorite stack of the week?
Sure. I think that it's Sean Watson, Amari Cooper. I think that this is a get-right game for Cleveland. No Nick Chubb. Everyone's going to be on Jerome Ford. Amari Cooper saying he needs to do a better job, sort of buying into that narrative. I'm a Browns fan, so I'll throw that out there. But, I think that the Browns come out and have themselves a game. I think that if you wanted to go more expensive, I think that this is a good week to go with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, avoid Justin Jefferson, and just do a complete fade of the top end wide receivers. They're not always guaranteed. We saw it. We saw Tyreek Hill at 40 yards last week. Jefferson is a very good player, but certainly he's not guaranteed. You could have a Jordan Addison in that and completely fade him by what if Jordan Addison catches a couple touchdowns. So there's ways to go against Jefferson, and getting Mahomes this low rostered is certainly intriguing.
Jamie, what do you got?
As far as builds go so far, it's Lawrence, Ridley, Kirk, brought back by either Nico Collins or Tank Dell. I think if you're going to do that stack, you should do both iterations, because one envisions a shootout and one envisions Jacksonville doing their damage early and Houston playing from behind and peppering Dell over the middle. So that's the one that I'm kind of heavily focused on the most. And then the Seahawks passing game as well, especially if Kenneth Walker's ownership continues to be one of the higher on the running back position. I think the Geno DK Lockett is a good way to get off that. Carolina, who's missing a bunch on their defense.
Yeah, one that I like, kind of, Devin mentioned the point of playing off Jefferson. Cousins and Hawkinson, I think, is one that you kind of have a pivot off of where people are going to go with Mahomes and Kelsey on that stack. You can play that Cousins and Hawkinson stack and step into that game against the Chargers. So I like that one quite a bit. And then Devin always gets mad at me, but my cheap ones, I like CJ Stroud and Nico Collins is my low end stack.
That's just because it's an Ohio State player and a Michigan player, and that never works.
It's unholy union. That's why it apparently is working in the NFL level. Last thing we want to hit our favorite discounts of the week and favorite bargain basement players. Jamie, I'm going to let you start with this one.
Well, I mean, if we're talking the cash standpoint, it's Tank Dell. I think that makes the most sense at 3,600. The beauty of someone that cheap is that, you don't even really need, even if they bust, you're not really losing much, and you don't have to worry about the chalk level in GPPs as well. So definitely him, definitely Jaden Reed. I mentioned Josh Reynolds at 4,200 is one of my favorites in GPP. And then you had mentioned it earlier, so I'm sorry if I'm stealing your thunder on watch the Derrick Henry news closely, but Tajay Spears would be one as well. He outsnapped Henry in week 1, believe it or not. So, that's someone that I think he does in fact miss.
Devin, what do you have for me?
Yeah, I think it's a couple guys. I think it depends if Eckler misses. So if Eckler misses, Joshua Kelly becomes probably the number one guy for me. If Isaiah Pacheco misses, Clyde Edwards-Helaire becomes super popular. Jerome Ford, don't love him. I think in cash, I think he's fine. Don't play him in GPPs. I don't think unless he breaks a big run like he did last week, I don't think he's going to have that great of a day. And then at wide receiver, I mentioned Adam Thielen. Michael Thomas at 5,300 if we want to spend up a little bit. And then at tight end, I mean, play whoever you want, but Zach Ertz is probably my guy. I'm not hoping for a lot. I'm hoping for 5 catches, 40 yards, maybe falls into the end zone, but he feels a little bit safer than some of these other guys. I like Laporta. I do. I played him last week, but he's just 4,200 or whatever the price is, a little bit more than what I want to pay for. So.
Yeah, I mean, you guys cleaned it out pretty well for me. The only other ones maybe Kendry Miller. If Kendry Miller is active and you want to go for a punt on GPP, he's very, very low end. And then Craig Reynolds, there's a chance there with that he could have the David Montgomery role. We could see him get in the end zone a couple times and kind of be that grinder in that Detroit offense. It seems like they're a little bit tentative on letting Jahmyr Gibbs go all the way with the main role there, and I think that coaching staff loves him, and I expect that he will be involved. But I think that's about all we have today. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add on this slate, or just general thoughts in general?
I will say, back on the tight end position, because I've gotten this question a few times this week, I am not into Kyle Pitts at all, even at under 4,000. I want to be so badly, but I think it's time to finally on that team and in their game style. Smith last week. So I think it's over for him in Atlanta. If he goes to a different team, maybe we see that finesse player that he is come out, but it's not happening in Atlanta.
All right. Devin, anything else?
Nope.
All right. Have a good night, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Good luck this week, and this is the Football Guys DFS Show.